The headlines. This evening, we'll be taking a look at what is really the latest situation as far as Grenada's COVID-19 status is concerned. There are some updates legally that we want to bring you up to speed on. And this evening, our panelists are Dr. Sean Charles, he's the Chief Medical Officer, Superintendent Vanny Kerwin of the Royal Grenada Police Force, and Attorney Ruggles Ferguson. Gentlemen, good evening.
Yes, good evening, Odette, and good evening, listeners.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
So, Dr. Charles, we're putting you in the hot seat. In the last week and a half, we've had some developments, and on the weekend, you had a further update for the nation. We're letting them hear from the horse's mouth this evening. The update is what?
Well, the update is after the last case that we reported a week ago, we have reported two further cases that were identified in Grenada. One, which is a contact of case number 25, or the case that was reported the week before. It was a close contact. And the other is a visitor who entered Grenada from Canada on the 12th of October. So that in essence is the new development with regards to new cases of COVID.
And how many people have we got in self-isolation or in quarantine at the moment?
I wouldn't be able to give you that number directly at present. As a result of our investigation of case number 25, we have 77 persons in quarantine. Now, the quarantine number is quite dynamic because we have flights coming in from countries that have community spread of COVID on a daily basis. And we have persons who are entering quarantine, and we have persons who are exiting. So it is a dynamic figure at present.
So the 77 people that you have mentioned that are in quarantine, are these people being quarantined at home or are they at quarantine facilities?
The majority are being quarantined at their homes.
And how do you decide on who gets the quarantine at home as compared to who goes to one of the facilities?
All right, so remember, this is an investigation of a COVID case in a community, so the dynamics are a little different. Here you encounter, you may encounter a variable number of persons who might have had some degree of contact with the individual. In this case, we have identified 77 known contacts. Now, we do not have quarantine facilities to simply take 77 persons within a 24-hour period and put them in quarantine. We have to rely on persons' sense of responsibility for them to, with regards to them obeying the instructions that they are given with regards to the directive given to maintain quarantine at home.
Okay, so you were expecting people to abide by the regulations, and
yes,
understand with patient 25, you have that high case number based on the contact tracing. We understand that person might have gone to a party as well. Is that true?
That has been reported, yes.
And how many people were you able to trace as a result of that?
So I cannot give you a number as to specifically how many as it relates to the party. But what I can tell you is that we have identified 77 known contacts from our investigation in the community.
And is it true that some of the NULO students are among those who may have come in contact with patient 25?
It is possible, yes.
And you said over the weekend, and I'm saying you, I'm using it loosely, the Ministry of Health issued a press release saying that another 2 positive cases had been identified. And you made it clear that one of the persons was totally unrelated to patient 25, whereas one was. That was the case with one.
That is correct.
Okay. Dr. Charles, we'll come back to you a little later on. As a result of patient 25 showing up on the radar's head, police have stepped up their surveillance activities, and we're happy to have Superintendent Vannie Kerwin with us of the Royal Grenada Police Force. Superintendent Kerwin, tell us, what is your modus operandi at this time?
Good evening, Odette, and let me say good evening to your viewing and your listening public again. You would appreciate, or the public would appreciate, that during the lull, there has been some sort of downside in the way we enforce the regulations. That has been the case because we have had no cases for a while, and the country seems to have been getting out of the zone that we were in, and so there has been some relaxing the enforcement of the regulations. However, we have been advocating for the last couple of weeks, prior to the announcement of case 25, that persons should continue to wear their mask and continue to adhere to all of the protocols and guidelines that are put in place to safeguard us as individuals and us as a country. Yes, we have stepped up our regulation with the advent of case 25, because we can now say that COVID is again at our doorsteps in our country, and so we need to ensure, in order to protect the citizens, we have to ensure that the regulations is being followed. And so we have stepped up our enforcement, not only on the mask, but the general protocols altogether. We have stepped up our enforcement in this particular regard. We know that the mask has been a topical issue, and based on the science, and Dr. Charles is here, so he probably can speak more to that, but based on the science available, we know that to mitigate against the spread would be wearing the mask. And so people are asking why the focus is on the mask. The mask is critical in the spread of the virus, and so we are enforcing the regulation in this regard very stringently to ensure that at least we minimize the spread as much as is possible. So we are out there doing what we have to do to ensure that we enforce the regulation, but in a common sense way, not in the draconian way that we've been accused of doing it. In fact, there have been quite a number of relaxed way in the way that we have been enforcing the regulation. We are geared towards more engagement and encouragement as opposed to enforcement and ticketing.
But some people have criticized your approach and saying that you've been reactive and you should have been proactive. What's your response to that?
But I don't think it's fair to say that we are reactive. Odette, remember, prior to case number 25, we have been on the media and we have been encouraging the public week after week after week to adhere to the protocol. The protocols including wearing of masks. So we have never changed our tune. We have never diverted from the message we wanted to send to the public. We have been consistently encouraging members of the public to adhere to all of the protocols. It might be seen that we are reactive because case number 25 has just been announced. But in all fairness to the RGPF, we have been out there week after week advising, encouraging the public to adhere to all of the protocols. So it's not true to say that we are reactive.
But your stepped-up activities were noted, and people saying, well, okay, all of a sudden we have case 25, it has cropped up, and the police behaving like madmen, not literally, but they see the step-up activities. And so in the weeks prior to, why weren't you probably stopping the buses and checking to see if people were wearing it, so that there would be this constant reminder?
Well, that we are an organization that understands what is happening. And based on the science and based on the information from the Ministry of Health, if there is no COVID case in Grenada, why should we draconianly enforce? So, it's not that we have not been advising, but we have not been enforcing the way we are enforcing now, because there was very little to mitigate against prior to case number 25 being announced. Now that case 25 is being announced, you understand that the need on the RGPF to ensure safety and security. And that's the reason why we are a lot more visible now than we have been before. Because you see, we do well, there are going to be the complaints. We don't, there are going to be the complaints. But, we understand what is happening. And, we are a very caring organization. And we understand the needs of our people. And because of that, it seems to be that we were not enforcing, but we are always reminding and encouraging. Now we are enforcing because there is now the need for us to enforce more than we have been doing before.
And some people think that you've sought to make an example of some people. We understand that 2 people are in the process of being charged. We had a report that they were already charged, but have had a note of clarification from the DPP's office that they have not yet been actually charged. They will be charged.
Are you speaking specifically to mask, or are you speaking to quarantine? May I ask?
Okay, so can you bring us up to speed then on, as far as charges are concerned, whether you have charged any person or persons?
Well, we have charged several persons under the public health COVID-19 regulations. It depends on charge specifically for what you're referring to. We have issued some tickets, particularly for the non-compliance with the wearing of masks. And yes, I can confirm to the public that we have issued a few tickets in this regard.
And do you have pending charges against 2 persons for any particular offense?
We are considering, we have considered the charging of a few persons for a breach of the quarantine. Again, Odette, we have to be very sensitive and sensible how we approach this situation. Even if someone may violate quarantine laws now, the question might be, is it prudent at this stage to take them into police custody and process them in the normal traditional way as we expect it to do? Bearing in mind that some of these people are currently in quarantine, we have to wait until the status is being declared to us. We have to ensure that they are free from the virus before we engage them in this particular way. But all of the groundwork that needs to be done have already been done. The requisite legal opinion and advice have already been sought, and in due course, we will do what needs to be done.
Thank you so much for the update, Superintendent Cohen. And to try and dissect some of the ramifications, some people are panicking and wondering what I should or should not do, what I can or cannot do in public. We have Attorney Ruggles Ferguson. Mr. Ferguson, good evening. It's great to have you with us.
Hi, good evening, Odette, and once again, good evening to all viewers and listeners. It's good to be among such an esteemed panel. Let me take the opportunity to commend Superintendent and the CMO for their efforts in this period. Superintendent has been a constant face in educating the public over the last few months, and that is indeed commendable. I think the public has taken note of it. And so, well, in relation to Odette, the existing regulations or laws in place with respect to COVID. And as I understand it, we have quarantine regulations in force. It came into force sometime in September, I believe the 16th of September or thereabout. And we also have regulations under the Public Health Act. And that also came in force sometime in September. Those remain in force. What the Quarantine Act specifically addresses regulations at the ports of entry, at shipping ports, at airports, the issue of quarantine assessment and the penalties for breaching those regulations. Just to back up a bit, remember there was an act, COVID Control Act, specifically designed to address the issue of COVID. And given the public outcry, the feedback from the public at the time, the act itself, in the form in which it was proposed, that has been on the shelf. And in its place have come the regulations under the Quarantine Act, which is an act way back in 1947 or thereabout. And our existing Public Health Act is an act that came into force way back in 1925. So there are regulations to address COVID, and there are certain penalties under both regulations. So for example, under the quarantine regulations, breach of the quarantine regulations will attract a penalty, maximum penalty of $10,000 upon summary conviction. And when you see summary conviction, it relates to the trial and determination of the matter in the magistrate's court. Under the Public Health Act, which mainly concerns local, so the Quarantine Act, that more concerns people entering from abroad, coming through our ports of entry. But the Public Health Act is the one that more concerns persons who are citizens and resident in Grenada. And one of the issues, I think, that has caused a stir probably in recent times is the enforcement of mask wearing. I think it's accepted that from the scientists that the wearing of masks will mitigate the possible spread of the virus. And
so Mr. Ferguson, the wearing of mask, it is part of the regulations. And
it is part of the public health regulations.
The public health regulations. So
yes.
Some people are concerned now that the police have stepped up their activities in light of the surfacing of patient 25. What are their rights? What are the limits of the law? What are the penalties? So for instance, if, and people particularly want to know if I'm driving my vehicle alone, should I be wearing my mask?
Right, I have heard that question raised. And it's an interesting question. What the regulations make provisions for is Section 4 of the Public Health Regulations. In fact, I have it before me here. And for one states that no person shall, without reasonable excuse, and that qualification is very important, without reasonable excuse, because it's not a strict liability offense in the sense of a traffic offense where you park on a no parking sign or you drive in a vehicle and you don't have a license, your license is not paid. In this case, there can be a reasonable excuse for you not wearing a mask, and we can probably look at possible reasonable excuses. But it speaks to be in a public, so no person shall be in a public space. And that is what it describes. Mask wearing is mandatory in public spaces without wearing a face mask, face shield, or face covering in a manner which covers his or her mouth, nose, and chin. So your mask must cover your mouth, your nose, and your chin. And you must have it whenever you are in a public space. Now, I thought it probably would have been helpful if the regulations themselves describe or identify what is meant by a public space. That there be some definition section that says what is a public space, because in the absence of that, as you quite correctly raise, if you are driving your vehicle and you are in your private vehicle and you don't wear a mask, is that considered a public space? Now, one view on it could be that you are in a private car on the public road, which represents a public space, or that you are in your private vehicle. And therefore, if you are, once you are within the confines of that vehicle, then it ought not to be considered a public space. So that is an issue because it is so critical and the wearing of mask ought to be in a public space, then a public space should be defined for the purpose of the regulations. And once it is left up to the discretion of an officer, then one officer who stops you in St. Paul's might say, well, you're driving your car, it's not a public space. Somebody who stops you in Sates might say, hey, you're on the public road, and therefore you're in a public space, and therefore you are liable to be ticketed in those circumstances. So you have those issues arising. In another jurisdiction, in fact, I was following a program coming out of Trinidad, and the advice, which is the advice I will give in those circumstances, is to avoid any issues or problems. Then it is better that you wear your mask unless there is a specific reason why you cannot wear it. It's good to just have it on, because once you take it out and you drop it somewhere, the best of us who may want to comply, we might tend to forget, and you run outside to deal with something, you jump in your vehicle. So it's best to have it on as part of your uniform when you are leaving home, and whether you are in the vehicle or not, to save the inconvenience of having to be stopped and ticketed. But at the same time, I would advise those who make the regulations, in order to avoid any issues of interpretation on such a critical issue, then the public space should properly be defined.
Great. I want to ask Dr. Sean Charles and Superintendent Cohen to weigh in. But Superintendent Cohen, let me come to you first. Tomorrow morning, I'm driving on the road, and you meet me at Wall Street, driving in, and I'm in my vehicle. I'm not wearing my mask. What applies?
I want to start the answer to this question to where Mr. Ferguson left off. We have been encouraging members of the public to wear your mask once you leave home. The initial iteration of the regulation, going back to the Emergency Powers Act, the intention of Parliament said that once you leave the comfort of your home, you should wear a mask. This public health COVID-19 regulation, indeed, as Mr. Ferguson has indicated, does not define public space. So it left that out. But I'm going to tell you what happens with it. The Commissioner of Police, in his wisdom, have created a policy specifically around this particular sector, recognizing that the legislature left us hanging in the sense that they did not give us a specific definition of public space. Commissioner has developed a policy, and last week that policy was communicated to all senior commanders of the police force, that it will not be the position of the police force to issue a ticket if you're driving in your vehicle not wearing a mask first off. So our initial response will not be to give you a ticket. Our initial response or initial engagement will be to encourage you to put that mask on, for the point that Mr. Ferguson has just made. So we will encourage you to put the mask on. And if you comply with putting the mask on, we're okay with that. If you become belligerent, if you become, resistant, then we may move perhaps to issuing a ticket. But first and foremost, we will not be engaging issuing tickets for wearing masks in private vehicle upfront, but we will continue to encourage you to put the mask on. However, if you're in that private vehicle and there's more than one person, then we're going to insist that everybody in that vehicle put the mask on. I know the question is going to be asked, what if we're from the same household? The question here is, how do you prove that to law enforcement? It's easy to say, is my brother, my uncle, my sister, my cousin. Mr. Ferguson has indicated that once you're in your private vehicle, we will not make it the order of priority to ticket you up front, but our initial engagement is going to be to encourage you to put that mask on. And that's a policy direction that has been taken by the commissioner and has been communicated to the rank and file of the police force. So that is what we are enforcing, and that is the engagement we're going to be having upfront. Engagement before ticketing.
So, Dr. Charles, we want to come to you and ask you, when these regulations were being designed, what was the intent? We've heard a debate about the need to define a public space, but what were you thinking? What was the intent here?
What we have to do is remember the purpose of wearing the masks. When someone speaks or coughs or sneezes or laughs or sings, they release tiny particles in the air. Now, if that person is infected, those tiny particles can carry these viruses from that person and infect someone else. When someone wears a mask, it serves two purposes. One, it limits the ejection of these particles into the air. So if the person is infected, it reduces the chances of infecting someone. And if that person is wearing the mask and they're close to someone else, that mask will act as a filter, as some of the moist particles will land on the mask instead of directly entering the person's respiratory pathway, their mouth, their nose, or landing in or landing on other parts of the face that is covered by the mask. And this is the purpose for insisting on the wearing of masks. Now, the effectiveness of masks as a method of prevention has been demonstrated. It is what is protecting healthcare workers who are caring for persons who are actually infected with COVID. Remember, we have had up till now 27 cases of COVID. Our healthcare providers have been interacting with all of these 27 persons, and we have not had a healthcare worker infection to this point. This is because they adhere rigorously to the wearing of masks as one of the interventions to ensure that they can conduct their work safely.
So, Dr. Charles, there's a question today about Mr. Ferguson, I believe, addressed the issue of if you have reasons not to wear the mask. And I saw on social media a woman being denied access to a supermarket. She had a certificate from her doctor explaining why she should be exempted. What happens in that case?
What I should say is, persons must remember, not wearing a mask is not a privilege. When you do not wear a mask, you're actually at risk. And the thing is, some of the persons who would want to sort out these certificates are the very persons that that are at risk of severe complications if they get this disease. All right, so for those individuals, ongoing education is important. All right, there are very, very few persons who cannot tolerate wearing a mask. So the advice is that everyone should wear a mask.
We need to take a commercial break, but let me just, I don't want to have to come back on this point. Superintendent Corwin, someone comes and complains to you that they went to Mr. XYZ supermarket and they did not allow them entrance. Do you consider that to be a violation of their rights? Because people are into this rights issue these days.
Mr. Ferguson raised the question of having reasonably excused. And the law, in fact, have a number of exceptions to wearing masks. I don't know if you want at this point for us to go through those sections. Okay, but so if their complaint or if what they're saying falls under one of these excuses, then it is an excuse in the law. And therefore, we cannot enforce if they find themselves into one of the subsections that give them the right not to wear the mask at that particular.
Okay, so we'll expand on that a little more when we come back. This is Beyond the Headlines. We will be right back after this commercial break. Stay with us.
Need a quick quick, convenient way to pay your bills and avoid lines? Use the online banking feature from Republic Bank, First Caribbean, or Co-op Bank. Contact them today to set up your online banking and enjoy 24-hour convenience to make your bill payments. Stay safe. Grenlec, we are united even when we are apart.
How going on, boy?
Hey, good old things.
Hey, Daisy.
Yeah.
Boy, in line, boy. Your house looking a real good day.
Boy, it's thanks to the hard-working and professional staff at the Housing Authority of Grenada. They handled me real nice. They did my plan, they did the construction, and I didn't even have to worry about a thing. They were there with me every step of the way, supervising the job, asking me about my concerns, giving me feedback as the house took shape. They were there from start to finish, and even put the keys in the palm of my hand. I give them an A++ for customer service.
Oh, it's people from housing bad, boy.
Boy, not bad. Excellent. If you're thinking about constructing your home, why not consult the Housing Authority of Grenada? You could visit them right down in the Sandino complex, or give them a call, 440-1015 or 440-1016, or check out their website, hag473.com. They go handle you. They go jog your blocks, they go draw your plan, they go tote your materials. Hey man, where you going? The Housing Authority of Grenada is your choice for affordable housing and a stress-free construction experience.
Rubis is giving you more ways to win because you deserve it. Spend $50 or more in Ultratech fuel or purchase a Rubigas refill at any Rubis service station and get an entry card. Win one of 5 amazing grand prizes worth $2,500, including Ultratech fuel, cash, groceries, bill payment vouchers, and home furnishings. Each grand prize winner gets to donate $500 to charity too. Plus, win exciting weekly prizes, including electronics. Make sure you're in with a chance to win. Win with Rubis. You deserve it.
Are you looking for quality herbs and herbal supplements? Or are you thinking about having a complete body cleanse to jumpstart your health? Then no need to look further. Visit Nirvana Natural Health Clinic, Detox Center, and Natural Health Store. We carry a wide range of herbal products for kidney and gallstone cleansing, male sexual enhancement formulas, asthma and sinusitis, gas and bloating, acid reflux, constipation, arthritis, imbalanced hormones, female health issues, liver cleansing, weight loss, and so much more. Also available, colonic irrigation, holistic health consultations, essential oils, and diffusers. Look out for our online natural health store coming soon. Call 231-6642 for 18-7115 or 449-7753 to find out about our delivery options or to book an appointment. Visit us at Belmont St. George's, close to the Fallage, Monday to Saturday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Nirvana Natural Health Clinic. Detox your way to health.
And welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening, we're speaking with the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sean Charles, Superintendent Vanny Cohen of the Royal Grenada Police Force, and Attorney Ruggles Ferguson. We will resume looking at the exemptions in a few moments, but let's just do a quick status report using our slide supporter this evening. We had on the weekend the announcement by the Ministry of Health that we have the notice of 2 additional cases being identified. And when we go past that, we take a look at the stats giving Grenada's count: 27 cases, 0 deaths, 24 persons having recovered. And then we go on and we look at the chart. And Dr. Charles, I'm not certain if you can see it quite well there, but I believe we started dealing with this in April based on what the chart was saying, and it takes us to that, lull. And then we have gone on to October, where we've had the 3 cases recently, patient 25, and then the 2 on the weekend, Dr. Charles?
Well, I'm not able to see the chart, but I believe it was maybe sometime in March when we announced our first case, and there was an initial cluster of cases, and yes, there was a lull for some time, and then these new cases identified.
And now that is the case, I'm certain you want to interject here with a timely reminder to people that we should never let our guards down.
Well, of course, I am certain that we are aware that many regions of the world are experiencing their second wave, and this second wave appears to be more intense in terms of the number of infections as compared to the first. all of this is happening at the same time when we necessarily must resume, must make attempts to return to normality in order to save persons' livelihoods and in order to assure a person's health, because livelihood is tied to health as well, particularly mental health. So while many regions of the world, and those particularly regions where we have strong links, are experiencing the second wave with intense ongoing transmission, and we are in the process of opening up. We have persons coming in every day. This disease will inevitably arrive at our shores again. What matters now is how we manage the situation going forward.
Okay.
All right. So we need the cooperation of the public if we are to effectively manage the situation so that we do not end up with the scenes that were seen earlier on in this pandemic.
A very poignant note to segue back into the discussion that we were having just before we took the commercial break. So Superintendent Cohen, you wanted to take us through the exemptions, and then we'd ask Mr. Ferguson to ventilate those points so that people get a greater understanding of what is at play here. So Superintendent Cohen, you're saying that there are some exemptions in the law?
Yes. In fact, Mr. Ferguson raised the question earlier on when he was reading Section 4 of the regulation, and Section 4 says, no person shall, without reasonable excuse. So if you have a reasonable excuse, then you shall not. That's specifically what the section is saying. And when you go down to subsection 5, it gives you what some of those excuses are. For instance, it says this: for the purpose of subregulation 1, which is the section that deals with masks, the circumstances in which a person has a reasonable excuse include those where, and it starts by a person cannot put on, wear, or remove a mask, face shield, or face covering because of any medical, physical, or mental illness, or impairment or disability which inhibits the ability to wear a mask. In fact, what this section is saying is, if it is physically impossible for you to wear a mask, then you're exempted from wearing a mask. Because if you cannot put a mask on or take a mask off, one should not expect you to wear a mask. And there are several other subsections that gives reasonable excuses for persons not wearing a mask. In fact, just to jump a few and get down to E speaks of persons who are eating or drinking. So if you're eating or drinking for that specific period of time, you're not expected to have a mask on, and therefore you're not expected to be ticketed during that period of time. If you're taking medication, that too falls under one of the exceptions. And there are several exceptions. So while there is a mandatory requirement on the citizens to wear a mask, the regulation also makes reasonable excuses for persons who at a particular time will not be wearing a mask or should not wear a mask and should not be ticketed for it.
Right. So you're dealing with the law should not be ticketed. And we want to go to Mr. Ferguson now to expand on this further, because businesses have the signs on their doors: no mask, no service. Do we have a gray area here, Mr. Ferguson? Somebody is saying, and we actually have a live case with a woman having gone to one of the supermarkets today. She had an exemption certificate from her doctor, but she was not allowed to enter the supermarket.
Okay, interesting point, Odette. What the law actually does in this case is provides circumstances in which you would not be ticketed, for want of a better term, or charged with a breach of the regulations. So, in other words, if you have a reasonable excuse and you are exempted, for example, from wearing a mask because of some medical issue, or the other examples used by superintendent, then you ought not to be charged. No, so that's one issue. The other issue is for the owner of a business place who then says, listen, this person is not wearing a mask, and let's say the person is sneezing, and in the business place, would there not lie a discretion to prevent that person from coming into the business place? You cannot be charged under the regulations unless you could establish that you are being treated in some discriminatory manner. Then that's a purely different issue. But in my view, if you don't have a mask, what the law protects you from being charged if you have a reasonable excuse. But that does not necessarily mean that that reasonable excuse may not be so reasonable for the business owner who feels, for good reason, that if you are allowed in without your mask, it may create some issues. And, you know, I want to make the point, is almost an immediate judgment call for those who have to enforce the regulations. So, for example, you know, I read with interest the issue of reasonable excuse, and the areas pointed out there. Now, suppose somebody is traveling. There is no requirement in the regulation to exempt you by reason of some professional finding that indeed you are you cannot wear a mask because you have X medical condition. So, for example, someone might be asthmatic, and that person then ought not to wear a mask based on the assessment of a medical official. And do you have to produce something which establishes that you have a medical condition, or is it left up to the discretion of the officer to accept your explanation or not accept your explanation? And I think that is an area, there is a gray area, especially when it comes to medical reasons. So somebody say, well, officer, I have asthma. Anybody can use that excuse. So it goes back now to the point that Superintendent was making, and I was very pleased to hear him make the point, because first and foremost, the starting point is that the wearing of a mask is not a penalty. It's not a penalty because you committed some offense. It is intended to protect you, and it's established by the scientists, the medical experts like Dr. Charles and others, that if you wear a mask, it reduces the possibility of you being infected and of you infecting others. So that's really the starting point. And therefore, in enforcing the regulations, I think a lot of the complaints that you hear has to do with the attitude of the officer who seeks to enforce the regulation. As Superintendent says, it's about engagement. Now, some people might be just downright offensive and rude about it, and therefore, naturally, an officer would react in a particular way. But it's important that those who enforce regulations be sensitive and also be understanding, and as Superintendent indicated, to use common sense in applying the regulations. That is extremely important, because what you want is the public to buy in to this whole thing, for the public to understand it's for your protection and it's for others' protection, the protection of others, your family and other persons. And therefore, once we had the patient number 25 and then there's a knee-jerk reaction, you have found several complaints over the last few days about how the enforcement was taking place. So, for example, there was a gentleman who complained to me this morning that he bought a drink, he had his mask on, and he took it out and put it in his pocket, and he was drinking his Lucozade. As he started to drink it, he had somebody say, hey man, there. So he said, well, my name is not A man in the first place, so he didn't really bother. And then an officer came up to him and said, listen, where your mask are charging you and so. I say, well, officer, I drink and have my mask in my pocket. And they, no, probably he should probably leave the mask on his face and pull it down to avoid those kinds of problems taking place, because the officers, of course, have their duty to enforce the regulations. But I think his main issue there was not the officer trying to enforce the regulations, is the manner in which the officer dealt with him. And I think, therefore, officers need to be a bit more sensitive, and I say so recognizing that you have people in the public who are downright disrespectful and rude to officers, and therefore you wouldn't expect the officer to be so gentle and so accommodating, because all that it needs at times is a little respect to prevent a charge being laid. If you forget your mask, apologize, explain to the officer, and that might be the end of it right there. So I'm just saying, Dr. Charles touched on it. Education is critical in this period. More and more public education. And 2, training by those who are responsible for enforcing the law, how they speak to members of the public, how they seek to enforce the law. That is also very critical. And I want to make the point that these regulations, even for lawyers, sometimes where to get them is an issue. So you have these regulations and orders coming out. Now, I would get them because, you have different sources that will send to you. But who reads the Gazette, right? All that the minister has to do is to put it in the Gazette. Now, it's a whole set of regulations that people may not necessarily read. And therefore, you need some kind of PR mechanism where you can strip the complexity. Nobody is going to read all these regulations. You want to know mask wearing is an issue, social distances, physical distancing is an issue. How many people, for example, should be gathered in one spot? The regulation says 20. If it's a funeral now, 75 allowed. If it's a wedding, 75. So all these little main points, just highlight it in a nice, properly packaged PR way and just send, mass produce it. Okay. So people can know the main points that touch and concern them. So 1, you have a problem with the regulations, and where can people find it? Secondly, we are not a reading public. People more relate to explanations given to them and something short and sweet. Bulleted, this is what you must do, this is what you must not do. And I find that aspect of it very wanting, and especially in this period of enforcement, then we need to embark on an organized public education campaign designed to ensure compliance and not necessarily go out there looking for people to charge.
And especially when you're looking for people to charge, it should not be amen, amen. On that note, we take a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Need a home, car, education, dream vacation? The National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Jackpot is $312,000. Play today for chances at a more satisfying life. Lotto. Play and win a lot of money.
A pleasant evening to everyone. Welcome to the National Lotteries Authority's Lotto Draw number 3129 for today, Monday, October 19th, 2020. I am Anisha Charles. With me this evening is Ms. Jocelyn Clark from PKF Accountants and Business Advisors, whose purpose is to ensure that this show is conducted in an accountable manner, and the game balls with industry standards and in a way stamped with. At this time, she will take us at hand because we're about to play for a jackpot of $312,000. But first, you're free to get a letter. Good luck. This evening's free ticket letter is Shake Your Tickets. Your free ticket letter for this evening is B as in ball. Let's proceed for 5 winning numbers. Good luck. First number this evening is Shake Your Tickets. First number up is 12. Second number. Second number up is 27. Third number up, 3, followed by 34. Fifth and final number. This evening is 11. Let's recap those numbers. Check your tickets. First number up is 12. The second, 27. Third, 3, followed by 34. Fifth and final is 11. So that's 1, 2, 12, 2, 7, 27, 0, 3, 3, 3, 4, 34, and 1, 1, 11. Your free ticket letter for this evening is B as in ball. Congratulations to all the winners of this evening's Lotto draw. Lotto, play and win a lot. Really play all the games of the National Lotteries Authority, supports sports, culture, and nation building. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.
I'm a winner. You are winner. We are winners. Winners.
It's the big one. Grenada. Imagine winning $25,000 and up to 6 times by scratching just one later ticket. Get your triple cash scratch tickets for a chance to live your best life. Win easy with Scratch. For just $3, match any of your numbers to any of the winning numbers and win the prize shown for that number. Reveal a money back symbol and win the prize instantly. Triple cash scratch in stores now. Must be 18 or older to play.
Cause I'm a winner. From the moment that I get up, I'm feeling right.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. This evening, we're looking at a public health regulation seeking clarity on a number of questions that have arisen in the last week since Grenada's 25th COVID-19 case surfaced. And so Mr. Ferguson was highlighting the very important issue of public relations and ensuring that this is done properly. I want to go to Dr. Sean Charles. Dr. Charles, what are you doing in terms of public education? Because we have heard that as a cry coming from the public.
Right. So public education is one of the areas that we know that we can do better. During the earlier response to COVID, we did a little better in terms of having a number of public service announcements up in the media. As the pandemic progressed, some of that fell by the way, and like I say, it's one of the areas that we believe and we know that we need to do better, because I'm sure you're aware that there isn't a lot in the media right now with regards to COVID prevention measures. Right. So this is something that we are actively trying to improve on.
Yes, maybe Odette, if I may recommend,
But Ruggles, can I just ask you to just hold for a quick second? We have a caller who came in since the break and was holding. Let me just take the call and then we come back to you. Caller, good evening.
Hi, good evening, Mrs. Campbell.
Good evening.
Very good. Again, a very good session tonight. A powerful panel. I think a lethal combination of lawyer, policeman, and CMO and health. So here's the point I'm making. So you first of all, I want to agree with Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, about the lack of communication. You know, the Gazette was a colonial instrument, Mr. Ruggles Ferguson, that we used a long time ago to ensure that laws were published and so on. So I want to ask tonight, how many people really read the Gazette? And I want to say further that if you conduct a survey in the Caribbean, hardly any politician reads the Gazette, although he would be passing laws in Parliament for that purpose. That's one. So therefore, you need a sexier, quote-unquote, sexier means of communication to people so that they can understand what is going on and be able to implement it. Secondly, we're talking about somebody in their private vehicle. Now, our CMO, for whom I have the greatest respect, Dr. Sean Charles, he answered the question. What is the purpose of the mask? The purpose of the mask is to ensure that should you have the virus, you do not infect other persons within your reach. Secondly, should you have the mask, persons within your reach would not be able to infect you. So what is the common sense about stopping individuals and asking them to wear a mask when you are in the privacy of your vehicle? And I agree that you have to look at the business of public spaces. Who can come and tell me to wear a mask when I'm walking in a public space where there are not people around me? The crux of the issue is your contact with people and your social distancing from people or your physical distancing from people. And that is where flexibility, a measure of flexibility, has to be considered.
Okay.
And finally, it is important, again, we need to change the name of the Royal Grenada Police Force. First of all, it should not be royal. That's another colonial vestige that we need to remove. There's no royalty there, right? And that's why we must become a republic as soon as possible. It should be the Royal Grenada Police Service. You're offering a service. You have your men who believe that because it is forced, they must act with brute force sometimes. It is a service. You render a service and you talk to people in a particular way. That's what we're talking about. These are the things that need to change.
Thank you so much, caller. Who would like to jump in here? Superintendent Cohen, I saw you smiling.
But the last part of what the caller say about changing the name to service, I am not going to comment on this. This is not an issue for me. I'm a member of the Royal Grenada Police Force. When and if the authorities that currently exist seeks to change that name, if I'm still in the organization, I'll still do what I have to do in the manner that I have to do it with. That is professionalism. The name, I am not going to comment on this. Whether it changes or doesn't change, I don't know the difference it's going to have.
Yes. Yeah, well, I'll leave Dr. Charles to comment on the medical aspect of it. But one of the issues the caller raised, of course, is the Gazette. And it's a point I have been making over the years, publicly too, in several public legal education fora. Here, so many people read the Gazette. I can probably say that 99.5% don't read it. And I'm not too sure if it's available because I was looking to see if there was anything later than September when the regulations were done. And I made some calls because I don't want if something happened last week and you don't know. So first and foremost, the Gazette is something that should be made available electronically. I'm not too sure if it is. If it is not, if it is, I'm not aware of or a place you can find it. So, for example, you have all of these regulations coming into force, and it's part and parcel of the legal requirement to gazette it. And why gazette it? The interesting point about why gazette it, if it is not gazetted, the public is not deemed to be aware of it. Because that's why you gazette laws come into force, like it's passed in the upper house, it's passed in the lower house, it goes to the upper house, it's debated and passed in the upper house, then it goes to the Governor General assents to it. But before it can become law, it must be gazetted so that the public must know. Now, the ironic thing is that it is gazetted, but nobody reads the gazette, so the public does not know. So that's one aspect of it. It's a legal requirement to gazette it. But the second point I wish to make is that even though it's gazetted, and even though the public has access to it, and I believe 99% of the public don't have access to the gazette, then the other issue now is that how can you get the message across? Because nobody is going to read all these legalese to try to get the point, even though it's available to them at their doorstep. And that's where the PR aspect of it comes in. And as I was about to make the point that I wish to recommend to Dr. Charles and the health team, together with the expert PR people, is to just produce something, for example, that says frequently asked questions about the regulations, where in that one document you can just capture. So, for example, how many people can be in a gathering? And the regulations say 20. So, you ask that question and answer 20. How many people now can attend funerals? Say 75. How many can attend weddings? 75. Just the basic issue, issues that arise. What's the penalty? You put the penalty if you are charged, what options you have, etc. So that people capture the essence of it. And that's the kind of PR I'm thinking about. And it can be circulated on Facebook, over social media. You can, send it around on WhatsApp. So it just captures the main points. So people don't have to read all these legalese and, to find out, because I think a lot of people now are being caught by surprise, because one of the things about regulations, that's not made in Parliament. That a Parliament under the Act itself, so you have a Quarantine Act and you have a Public Health Act. And under the Act itself, it gives authority to the minister to make regulations.
Right.
So as the situation is fluid, the minister may make regulations. And that changes from time to time, and sometimes it's very difficult, even for legal people, to keep up with it.
Right.
And that's why the PR is so important.
Great. I hate to interrupt you, but we try to accommodate as many callers as possible. We have a caller who's been patient. Caller, thank you. Please go ahead with your contribution.
Yes. Good evening to all. Yeah, persons driving, I believe they should wear a mask. What's about if you give somebody a ride? Your private space have shifted to a public space. The second point I would like to make is that I think all dead people should be tested, because someone can die asymptomatic and would have spread the virus, and that is a problem. All dead people should be tested. That is directed to the doctor. Thank you very much.
Dr. Charles? He's looking at me over his glasses. Dr. Charles, I am tossing that directly at you.
All right. So there, I mean, as in everything, there's a criteria for everything. Someone dies from a car accident, there's no need to test them for COVID. Someone gets a stroke. In most instances, there's no need to test them for COVID. But we do maintain active surveillance for respiratory diseases. So someone going to hospital for pneumonia, this is one of the settings in which we test this individual. If the individual dies, COVID could be a cause of death. So the decision to test is based on what is circulating, which is basically the epidemiology. All right, on the conditions that is circulating in the country.
All right, so trying to keep up with pace at all sides. We have some questions coming in on the social media platform. Let me see if I can get to some of them. Is the next lockdown due for Christmas? Dr. Charles, you could take that one as rapid fire.
Well, I am not aware of plans to have a next lockdown, I want to advise that if the public cooperates with us and we ensure that we do not have a negative situation here with regards to COVID, there should not be the need for a lockdown.
Somebody is saying, just imagine God's people are no longer allowed to remove their mask when they're singing or praying during the church service. Only the persons on the platform are allowed to do so, and they are appalled that our Christian leaders have accepted this form of persecution without any resistance. Your thoughts here?
Well, that is, I guess, one way of looking at it. In my opinion, everyone should wear a mask.
And Superintendent Corwin, somebody is saying that this mask wearing thing is a money-making thing, and they're wondering whether it is to help to fill the gap made by the deficit that the Prime Minister has spoken about.
You know that I have been hearing this a lot, and I want to say this to the public. The Royal Grenada Police Force is a creature of statute. We don't make laws. When laws are made by our parliamentarian or legislatures, it is handed down to the RGPF for enforcement. If we do not enforce those laws, these same people would say, you know, what are we doing? We're not doing our job. We're being paid to do something that we are not doing. Now we are enforcing the regulation. We're hearing complaints, but all we can do is what the legislatures have asked us to do and what we are being paid to do, which is enforce the law. We must do so with common sense. We must do so professionally, but that is our responsibility. So whether or not it is seen as money making, which I can speak for the RGPF here, we are not doing this enforcement to pull the coffers of the government as a priority or as a strategic intent. We are doing what we're doing because we are mandated to do this by law. We are carrying out the functions and responsibilities of our employment, and that is what we are there to do, and that is just what we are doing. Whether it's the public health, COVID-19 regulation, whether it's the Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Act, whether it's offenses, sexual offenses or harm offenses or murder, we are doing them all. So why are we being singled out for this particular act, but nobody says anything about the tremendous work that the RGPF is doing across the country? And I think this is kind of unfair and unfortunate.
Somebody asked, if a police gives me a ticket and he's not wearing a mask, he's given me a ticket for not wearing my mask, but he wasn't wearing one at the time. Should I accept the ticket or pay the ticket?
I think this is an issue for mitigation for the magistrate. It doesn't mean that you did not commit an offense. The police officer might be in wrong or would be in wrong by not wearing a mask, but that doesn't make you right for not wearing one. So you go to court and argue the fact that I was given a ticket by a police officer who was not wearing a mask, and the magistrate may use that in a mitigating way to say, well, he thinks it's unfair, he thinks it's biased, but that does not make you correct by doing that.
All right, we have
and I just want to probably add here, if I may just plug in that point, because, you know, I've heard complaints of that nature too, and maybe superintendent is something that the police can address high command just to make sure that people set the example, because it would seem ironic that somebody is charging you for not wearing a mask and the person himself or herself does not have a mask. But I agree with superintendent that it does not constitute a defense for you not wearing the mask unless you have some reasonable excuse under the law. But by way of example, it starts from the top, and it's important, I think, that officers who are enforcing the law themselves ensure that they wear masks.
And Mr. Ferguson, I must agree with you here, and this is the priority of the commissioner. In fact, in our last commanders meeting, it was drilled down, and the commissioner vehemently make it clear to all officers, we are enforcing the regulation, we should be examples of the regulation. And officers who are not wearing masks, the public may not know that, but actions are taken against them for not doing that. We can't be asking you to wear a mask and we are not wearing one. Internally, we do discipline our officers for not wearing one.
Okay, and we have a call on the line. Caller, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, please.
A special evening to the panel. While some very interesting sentiments has been echoed, in particular by Mr. Ferguson, I beg to differ on some. And when I say differ, the nucleus of the problem that we are faced with in Grenada is at our ports. Now, all the cases that came in previously or can trace back to is the airport. Now, one will ask the question then, if that is the nucleus of the problem, then why we continue business as normal at the airport? You are saying to us, the public, that this is our new normal whereby wear masks, all measures are in place. But yet and for all, we are opening back for commercial activities as normal. Now, they say the definition of madness is doing the same thing over and expecting a different result. Now, secondly, the level of authoritarianism that is being exercised, to me, is to strike fear in the heart of the people. Now, we know that there are large percentage of the population is not even working. So where are they even getting money to pay for fines, right? And I want to say that this is a hidden agenda, because how can we say that the virus is coming in on a second phase with certainty, but yet we are saying it's a new virus? It certainly doesn't make no sense logically. So what I am seeing here is an agenda to break the will of the people. And once the will of the people is being broken, it's to get them to a submission and an acceptance of certificate of vaccination ID, which is the acronym for COVID. Yeah, and to bring the people to a submission and an acceptance of the vaccination for the new year. That is the agenda here, and they need to know that is not everyone that is sleeping. People's eyes are open, and we need to stand up as a people for our rights. Our rights are being infringed upon. You cannot say to someone or dictate to someone. I am not saying no to masks, but the level of draconian measures that is being taken against the people now is unfair to all, and we need to look at the broader picture. It's an opportune time for us now to diversify and go into the agricultural sector. We are not gloating to see our brothers and sisters in the tourism sector suffer, but why should we open up the economy for one sector of the economy? Thank you.
So much, caller, for that. Dr. Charles, I saw you had a frown on your face. Dog, why are you looking at them making you tired? They're wearing you out?
The thing is, part of the issue with this COVID pandemic has been what is termed the infodemic, or the misinformation that is circulated around this condition. I do not remember any of us mentioning anything about a new virus. It is still the COVID virus. All right, it is just a new wave. All right, an upsurge in the number of infected cases that is being observed in other cases, but it's still the same COVID virus. The closure of the ports was a measure that was taken to control the COVID outbreak here in Grenada earlier on. There was a lot that we did not know about the virus, and we needed to increase the capacity of our system, of our local health system and all local structures to deal with this, with the situation. But the closure of our ports also brought with it some untowards negative effects, such as the unemployment that the caller observed. It cannot go unnoticed that a large part of the employment in Grenada is provided by tourism. It's also provided by commerce, by trade. If we keep our ports closed, we stand to further harm many, many more individuals. Because remember, COVID is not the only negative effect of this pandemic. One is the economic downturn and the loss of employment that followed. Now, in addition, the caller may not know that a large part of the agriculture sector is supported by tourism. In fact, a lot of our farmers sold their produce to our supermarkets and our hotels. All right. If these are not functioning, then I mean, this is not like in the old days where we simply only grow what we need to eat and only eat what we grow. All right. It simply does not function that way anymore.
All right, so Dr. Charles, we're going on to an issue here that we could spend another hour on, and I see the clock has ticked by and we're already on 5 minutes after the hour. We're stealing a couple minutes out of the producer's time this evening. Mr. Superintendent Corwin, somebody has been asking on social media for a while, the tickets for not wearing a mask, how many people have been charged in the last week? I believe the ticket is $350? Superintendent Cohen. All right. So he did have some internet issues a little earlier, so he seems to he need to disengage and come back on. Mr. Ferguson, you wanted to make a point?
No. Well, I was just making a point that he's frozen up. But the tickets, there is the fixed penalty notice. So you are issued a ticket for any breach of the regulations under COVID. So probably the most popular issue now is whether or not you wear a mask. And the fixed penalty is $350. You have 31 days, I believe, either 30 or 31 days to pay the ticket. And if you don't pay the ticket, you can opt not to pay it. You can challenge it. You have 31 days to pay it. If you choose to challenge it, or if you don't pay the ticket, then it goes to court. The ticket itself serves as a complaint before the magistrate. And so that's translated into a charge. And if you are found guilty, then the maximum fine is $500. And, you know, I must make the point too that right now, I can't say so definitively and authoritatively, but from my knowledge of fines in the other parts of the region, probably Grenada has among the lowest fines, which is $500. In Belize, for example, it's $5,000 or 2 years in $5,000, 2 years imprisonment. In Jamaica, it's between 10,000, well, Jamaican and 100,000 Jamaican. And in several of the countries, other countries, it's much higher than Grenada. So you have an opportunity, you can say, listen, okay, I was not wearing a mask, a ticket has been issued, I will pay the $350 fine. Or I am prepared to go to court to contest it. So after the 31 days expire, you go to court and you say, listen, at the time, I had my mask, but I was drinking or eating something, I was taking my medication, or I'm entitled to one of these exemptions because I suffer from some physical disability, I suffer from some mental disability, or because of a medical issue, I could not wear a mask. So you can actually go to challenge it. There is a trial. If you're found guilty, then you're convicted of the offense and the maximum is $500. So actually what I observed about it is the maximum is not too far from the fixed penalty. It's just a $150 difference.
All right. Superintendent,
but it saves time for everybody. And I think not every country has the fixed penalty notice. And what it does, it saves time for the individual who is charged. If you are not contesting it, you say, listen, I was not wearing a mask and so I wouldn't contest it. I just go and pay the fine. There's no conviction recorded. And, you know, it's paid like a traffic ticket.
And speaking of traffic ticket, tongue twister, Superintendent Cohen, there was a question. You did have some latency issues when we asked you the question, so probably you didn't hear. How many people have been charged in recent times for not wearing a mask or ticketed?
Sorry about that. I just had some connectivity issues there. I lost the internet for a while. Unfortunately, I have not quantified the number of charges or tickets. But I can say that we have issued quite a number of tickets for non-compliance with the regulations. I'm not quantified, so I'm not in a position to tell you it's 20, 30, or 40, or beyond that, or lower than that. But we have issued a number of tickets.
All right, gentlemen, we're getting ready to wrap it up this evening. To our viewers on social media, unfortunately, we have not been able to get to a lot of your questions. But somebody's begging, please, 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 if I can ask the panel to talk about the tracking device. We did a report in the news this evening where Antigua is implementing the tracking device. Dr. Charles, what's the progress there with the tracking device?
What I can comment is that we have begun deploying these devices. Right now, they are used for persons who qualify for home quarantine.
So people are definitely using them and you have no challenges there?
Well, of course, as in any new technology, you are going to encounter some teething problems. And we have just started deploying them. So as the issues arise, they will be addressed going forward.
Okay, great. So closing comments this evening. Superintendent Cohen, what are your closing words for the Grenadian public?
I just want to reiterate the fact that Section 4 mandates that we should all wear masks once we're in public space. The debate about whether in your private vehicle or not will be here with us. I think Mr. Ferguson answered that question very succinctly, that once you leave your home, you should wear a mask. The Act did not define public or private space. And because of that, we had that policy position that was taken by our executive to engage you if you are in your private vehicle and encourage you to wear a mask, as opposed to just issuing you a ticket for non-compliance. That at some point, I'm sure, will be taken up by the court, and a determination or a ruling will have to be made, whether we're right or wrong. So to avoid the confrontation, we advise members of the public, once you leave your home, wear a mask. Whether you're in your private vehicle or in your public space, wear a mask. Our engagement effort is going to be, our enforcement effort is going to be engagement first. So we're going to dialogue with you. We want you to wear the mask and be compliant. As one of the callers said, this is not about making money. This is about following a protocol that has the propensity to save all of our lives and keep our country safe. So we continue to encourage, and we will continue to encourage members of the public to wear their masks. We have seen a number of defiance, and we have been dealing with a number of defiance. It is not about the RGPF. And I want to answer a question in closing, Odette, where one of the callers talk about hidden agenda. And I want to make it clear, the RGPF has no hidden agenda with the public health COVID-19 regulation or with the virus is concerned. We are given a legislation to enforce, and we are enforcing this legislation with common sense and with professionalism.
Let me just ask you two rapid-fire questions. If I'm going into a restaurant, am I supposed to be wearing my mask, take it off when I get to the restaurant, or I'm exempted?
Well, in fact, there is a provision that says here, we didn't get to it, but when we spoke earlier on about the example you gave about going in the supermarket, let me just quickly read what the legislation says to you. It says the owner or operator of any business, establishment, or office which provides goods or services to the public shall ensure that a member of the public is not permitted entry to or otherwise remain within any enclosed space within the premises or the business. So if you're entering a restaurant, you should be entering with your mask on. When your meal is served and you're about to eat, according to the law, that's a reasonable excuse you have by taking the mask off and having your meal. But you should enter with the mask on. And the business owner or operator should ensure that you enter with that mask on, or else deny you entry.
And if I'm walking down Church Street tomorrow with a mask under my chin, what will the police do or is entitled to do?
Well, you're not wearing a mask in that case. You know, the law clearly said it must cover your nose, your mouth, and your chin, not just your chin alone. So the proper wearing of the mask requires you to cover both mouth, nose, and chin. And in that case, you're not wearing a mask.
So what will the police do, Superintendent? Somebody already asked on social media if it's only one part of the question you hear. I have selective hearing this evening.
What will the police do? Well, it depends on the police officer that encounters you. Some person may issue you a ticket upfront. I think the professional thing to do is to say, listen, you do have a mask on your face. It has not been worn properly. So I want to encourage you and advise you to wear the mask the way we are told to wear it. If you comply, is the end of the matter for most police officers. If you're belligerent, if you're disrespectful, if you become resistant, then that leaves the police no choice but to issue you.
CMO, your closing thoughts this evening?
What I want to remind the public is that there is a public health reason behind all of these regulations. And the main goal is to protect you, to protect your health, to ensure that you and your family remain safe. Just comply. That is all we are asking. Help us help you.
Help us help you. And Mr. Ferguson, you have been cutting through the legal ramifications of all of this, and you have the final words this evening.
Yes, well, what I want to do is to add my voice to the calls, to comply with the regulations. It is all part of protecting everybody. This is an issue that is not unique to Grenada, but it's common to the entire world. We see what is happening in the United States now, over 220,000 deaths. And what we know is that we do not have the capacity here to deal with any serious COVID outbreak. And therefore, prevention is what is key. And we all have a role to play in preventing the spread. And having said that, I just wish to reiterate the point made earlier that is important that we have, very organized and structured legal education taking place, because it's with the opening of our ports, inevitably, what you see in every country of the world, with the opening of the ports, the numbers will rise. And therefore, it is important for people, and I think I need to make this plug, for people who are coming into the country to be very clear on what the regulations are, so that when they come here under the impression that these are the regulations, ABC, and then when they land, they discover that it's really XYZ. So I think communication and effective communication, effective public relations, presenting these regulations as simple as possible so all can understand is a very important activity in this period. And the aim should not be really punishing, but to get everybody on board this train to ensure that we keep COVID out of Grenada.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for...
And that's the state of Grenada.
The state of Grenada.
Petit Martinique, and out of the Caribbean, as a matter of fact. It's very important that we really keep it out of the Caribbean.
Thank you very much. So Superintendent Vannie Cohen, Chief Medical Officer Dr. Sean Charles, and Attorney Ruggles Ferguson, we'd like to thank you sincerely for joining us on the panel. To you, our viewers and listeners, a sincere thank you, and for all of you who posted your comments on social media and you did call. This program would not be the same without you. We just want to remind any one of you who joined us late, the program remains on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel so that you can view it and take in some of the information that has been given tonight. I think Superintendent Cohen and the other panelists did ventilate the point about what constitutes a private space, although there seems to be a gray area. So if you're in your vehicle, the word is the Mask should be part of your uniform, so you're stepping into your vehicle, you should wear it. If the police stop you and advise you to wear it, don't give the officer any trouble. He won't call you a man, but if you're rude to the police officer, you'd end up being into some kind of trouble. That's it for tonight's edition. I'm Odette Campbell on behalf of the entire production team saying it was great being on this journey with you again. We'll see you again for another edition of Beyond the Headlines. So long for now.